Hi, and welcome to the second part of our video series on creating PowerPoint games for pets. In this session, we will learn how to animate the objects that we created and how to save our game as a video. If you would like to go back and watch the first video again, or if you haven't had the opportunity to view it yet, I've included a link to it in the description below. Now that we have our objects and our background created, let's talk about how to bring it to life. For this demonstration, I will be using three different objects. Two of these objects we had from our first session. I added a new one though using the 3D icons in PowerPoint. So in order to add an animation to an object, what we need to do is make sure that we first clicked on an object, and then we'll select the Animations tab on the top. By clicking on this Add Animation drop-down menu, we'll see that there are four different categories of animations here. So for the green ones here, these are our entrance animations, and what they basically do is cause the object to appear. So if you hover over these, it will give you a brief overview of what the animation does. Now we'll go ahead and just select one so I can show you an example. Let's click on the fly in animation, and what this will do is it'll cause the object to come into view from off this screen. So if I click this, you'll notice that the mouse appears from the bottom to the top. Now we can also change the entrance point by clicking on this drop-down menu here. So again, the mouse came from the bottom to the top, but let's say we wanted it to come from the left corner in or from the center in. What we would do is click on this Effect Options drop-down menu and select the direction from which we want the object to enter. So if I click on from left, you'll notice now that the mouse comes from the left-hand side of this screen. Let's go ahead and add another animation to this mouse. So the yellow here, these are our emphasis animations. So an object already on the screen will basically perform an action that will call attention to itself. So let me use spin as an example. So if you notice, this animation causes the mouse to spin 360 degrees. Now, like the entrance animations, these can also be customized, which I'll get into more later in this video. Now we have the things in red down here, and these are our exit animations. And what this basically does is it causes the object to disappear from the screen. So if I choose this wipe example here, you'll notice what's going to happen is the mouse will disappear. So like we did with the entrance animation, we can also select the direction that we want this to happen from. So if you notice, the mouse disappeared from nose to tail. But if we wanted the mouse to disappear from tail to nose, all we have to do is by clicking on this Effect Options, select the from the top. And here we go. We also have motion path animations, and for this session, this is what we are going to be using quite frequently. Motion paths basically allow us to dictate how we want our objects to move across the screen. So let me show you an example of this. So our motion paths are down here at the bottom. Let's just pick a straight line. And as you can see, aside from the animations that we have here, we are also able to add or able to include more entrance effects, more emphasis effects, more exit effects, and more motion paths. If we were to click on the more entrance effects, we can see that we have a lot more options here. An advantage, and actually this is a really big advantage of using the drop-down menu versus this pane here, is that this drop-down menu will allow an object to contain multiple animations. So if I were to add another animation to this mouse, it's just going to add to the order of animations that I selected. Now, if I selected from this side here, what it does is instead of adding a new animation, it replaces an animation. So while this pane here is seemingly more convenient, I really do prefer sticking exclusively to this drop-down menu, and that will help me to to avoid accidentally overwriting a previously placed animation, which once it's done, it really is a pain to correct if you don't catch it right away. And here is our animation pane button. Now the animation pane is really just a log of all of the animations that we've included, as well as the order in which they'll be executed. In a way, we can think of it as almost the equivalent of a storyboard that an animator or a filmmaker would use, and this is going to be really important as we move forward with this session. So I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of how this works. Now keep in mind, don't worry if you don't get all of this the first time, as I'm going to be repeating it multiple times throughout this series. So I've already set up some animations on this second slide so that I can demonstrate this. Now here we see different icons to the left. Here we have one that has a number and a mouse. Here we have one that's blank. And here we have one that contains what looks like a clock. So the number with the mouse icon, this basically represents a transition that requires the user to click on the mouse. In other words, this animation will not happen until the user either clicks on the mouse or clicks on the space bar or clicks on the right arrow key or left arrow key, but there's something that needs to be done to trigger the action. Now if you look at this one here that is blank, sometimes it'll contain the number 0, but in this case it's blank. This indicates that this action will take place with a previous action. So right now we have a pulse action, which means that the color or the mouse will fade in and fade out. So because we don't see any icon here on the left, it means that it'll take place with the one right above it. And we can see too, by looking at the end here, we can see that these two are lined up. So this will not require any type of action on my part to create it, other than to trigger the animation right before. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And lastly, we have what looks like a clock. So this clock indicates that whatever action that we have here, it will happen following the completion of the previous action. So once this is done, this should take place. And you can also see it here on our timeline that it's slightly after the others. So now if I were to go into slideshow mode and actually view this slide, you'll see how these animations on the left will work. So really what's going to happen is I'll need to click on it. Once I click on it, the mouse will appear. When the mouse appears, it will pulse, and then following that, it should disappear. So I'm going to go into slideshow mode. I'm going to view it from this current slide. I can also use a shortcut of Shift F5 on my keyboard if I want to, but let's just use this from current slide button. So again, you'll see that there's no mouse here. To make the mouse appear, I do need to click on my mouse or the space bar. So actually the pulse was a little difficult to see. So let's change that action to make it a little more obvious. So instead of using a pulse, now what I can do is, like I mentioned here, this menu here will replace an already existing animation. So if I were to click on here and click on spin as an example, you'll notice that the pulse option has now been replaced by spin. So let's go back and view this one more time. Okay. So you'll notice the mouse spun as it came in and then it disappeared. Now that we've covered the basics, let's dive right in. So what I want to do, let's start off simple. We'll go ahead and get the mouse to run from one side of the screen to the other. And before I do that, let's get rid of these animations. So I can click on the first one, hold down the Shift key, click on the last one, and then I can either hit the Delete key on my keyboard or I can right click and remove. Okay, what I also want to do is I'm going to close this animation pane to give myself a little more room. And let's move these two objects off the screen for now. Since this mouse is going to be performing multiple actions, what I want to do then is to copy it and paste it multiple times, and that way I have several different versions of the mouse to play with. So I'm going to right click here and copy. And again, I could use Control C for that. And then I'm going to right click and paste. Actually, since I want multiple copies of this mouse, I'm going to use Control V. Okay, now that we have our mice, I'm going to pull most of them off of the screen. I'll just keep one for now. And I can group them together like this and move them off. So let's get started. I want to have the mouse run from off screen here to off screen here. And so in order to do that, I'm going to change the angle of the mouse. And I'll move it right here so that's out of view. And I'm going to click on the animations tab. I'm going to add an animation and I'm going to go with a motion path. So again, we just want a straight line right across the screen. I'm going to select lines. When you see the green dot here, this is where the mouse is going to start. And when you see the red dot here, this is the end point. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this end point by clicking down on the mouse and holding. And I'm going to drag it across the screen. And I want to keep it as close to the border as possible without having it show up, because this really does affect the timing. And by timing, I'm going to show you what I mean. So now that we have our mouse running across the screen, I need to change the timing of it. I can either make it faster or I can make it slower, and let me show you how you do that. And so this is going to require us to go back to the animation pane. And here we have our first animation with the mouse running across. And by clicking on here, I can go to timing. And right now, the mouse is going to take 2 seconds to run across the screen. Let's change that a little to see what it looks like. Let's change it to 3 seconds. And so that's what we end up with. If we wanted to go faster, we can absolutely do that. Let's try it. Let's go 2 seconds and see what happens. So let's go back to timing. And let's go with 2 seconds. Now that we have our mouse running across the screen from left to right, what I want to do is have the mouse now run back across the screen from right to left. And this can be done in multiple ways. I find it easiest to take another copy of the mouse or another version of the mouse. Let's go ahead and use the second mouse. So I'm going to turn my mouse facing the other direction. I'm going to have this as the starting point. And now I'm going to add an animation to have it, same animation, but just starting here and running back the opposite direction. So I'm going to add an animation to this. Select the lines. And again, this green represents the starting point and this red represents the ending point. So what I'm going to do is take the end point, click on it, hold it, and drag it across. And again, I want to get it as close to the border as possible. Okay, so now we have our mouse running one way and a second mouse now running in the opposite direction. But to our pet, it should look like it should look like the same object. Now here's where the animation pane is going to come in. And so here we have our 2 animations here. And what I want to do is I actually want to have my mouse start running across the screen right away. I don't want to have to click on my mouse to make that happen. And so what I'm going to do is I can either click like we did on this drop down menu, or I can right click on it. Either way works. And I'm going to go to timing. And instead of having it start on click, what I want to do is set it so it starts with previous. Now I'll go ahead and click on the OK button, and as you see, we no longer have the mouse there, and instead it's been replaced. It'll be replaced either by a 0 or a blank spot, which means that it's going to be happening with the previous action just being the start of this slide. With our second mouse, what I want to do is I want to have it run across after. And again, I don't want to have to click on the screen to make it happen. So what I'm going to do is, again, same thing. I'm going to right click or click and pull down. I'm going to go to timing, and I'm going to have it start after previous. And that way, after the first mouse runs across, the second mouse will then run back. So if you notice here on the timeline, we have this animation happening first and then this animation happening second. Now, although I use the after previous option, technically, because we are going to ultimately be creating a video out of this, I could have left it as a mouse click, as really once I transfer it over to a video, or once I save it as a video, it's going to just play in the order that I have it here. But because we're also going to be learning how to create interactive games at some point, I just want to get us into the habit of using with previous and after previous. And so we have one action now happening after the next. So let's see what this looks like. And again, I can hold down the shift key and press F5, or I can go to slideshow and have it play from current slide. So as you notice, as soon as it went to the slide, the first mouse ran across, and then it was directly followed by the second mouse running back. So what I want to do here is, let's say we wanted a delay between the time that the first mouse ran across and the second mouse ran back, because really it just happened one after the other right here. I could set that up by putting in a delay between these two, and to do so, I would choose the timing again, and I can choose the amount of delay that I want to have or the amount of delay that I want to take place between the two actions. And so let's set it for 1 second here, and that way we'll have a 1 second delay between the time that the first mouse runs across and the second mouse runs back. So let me now show you what that's going to look like. And let's say I wanted the mouse, I'm going to pull this off just a little because the tail's still showing. Now let's say I want the next mouse to run from this corner to the bottom corner. It's going to be the same process. So since we have multiple mice, I'm going to go ahead and pull another one across. And with this mouse, I'm going to rotate it so that it's going from this corner to that corner. And so again, I'm going to start off screen. And same process that we just went through, I'm going to add an animation to this. And I'll add another straight line. I'll take the endpoint and drag it across the screen. And with this animation here, I'm going to have it start after the previous action. So again, I'll click on timing. I'll select after previous, and let's give it a 1 second delay as well. So now we have 1, 2, 3 actions happening in sequential order. And here I'm going to have the mouse run back from corner to corner. So again, same process. I'm going to click on the mouse. I'll rotate it in the direction that I want it to go. I'll drag it off screen. But here, before I animate it, let's go ahead and make this screen a little smaller, and it'll make it easier to work with. So again, I can click on the slider bar and zoom, or I can hold down the control key and scroll down on my mouse. Okay, so with this mouse, instead of having it run in a straight line, what I want to do is I want to have it run in a zigzag pattern. And so I'll click on Add Animation, select Custom Path. Now with Custom Path, I need to select the starting point. So I'm just going to start here in the middle of the mouse, and I'm going to click and hold down. Now as I drag the mouse, you'll notice it's creating a line, and this is going to represent the path of the mouse. So let's have it kind of zigzag back and forth. before running off of the screen. Now to end this, I'm going to have to let go and double click. And because this mouse is now taking a zigzag pattern versus a straight line, let's change the timing to make it a little slower. So again, I'll click here next to the animation that we just added, click on timing. I'll change it to after previous, and instead of having it take 2 seconds, let's go 4 seconds. And you'll notice 4 seconds is not on this menu, but if I wanted 4 seconds, all I have to do is click next to the 2, delete it, and replace it with the 4, and click OK. So now we have our mouse running in a zigzag pattern across the screen. And so let's take a look at this and at what the 4 animations look like together. So I'll go back to slideshow from current slide. And that is what it looks like. At this point, I'd like to apologize as I realize that there's still quite a bit that I would like to cover regarding animations, including how to overlap animations, how to create delays when overlapping animations, how to work with ungrouped objects, and how to do slide transitions. And so instead of having an hour-long video, what I'd like to do is to break this up into 2 parts. But before I wrap this part up, I just want to show you a couple of other things. So in order to create an animation sequence, really as we look at our videos and how to set this up, if we have a few steps and repeat them in different patterns, we can create an entire routine out of it. And that's what I'd like to do with this as well. So here we have 4 animations on this slide. Now it really is up to you how many animations you would like to place onto a single slide. But my suggestion would be that instead of trying to create a whole slew of animations on one slide, I think that it's actually better to break up the slides and just have maybe up to 10 animations per slide. There have been cases where I've had 40 or 50 animations on one slide, and I can tell you based off of that having too many animations can make things confusing. Especially since or as this list here will continue to grow. The other thing too is it's hard to review every time you add a new animation. So let's say I'm 12 deep and I add another animation to that, and if I wanted to see how that animation fits into the whole sequence, I would have to go back and watch all 12 animations before I can see that last one that I've added. And so in order to break up the animations onto multiple slides, it's pretty easy. All I would have to do is copy this slide, and I can do that by right-clicking and selecting the copy option, and then I will just paste the slide here. Now, when pasting the slide, what I would recommend is that you select this middle option. And the reason being is if you do have a customized background, in this case, we have a colored background, this will continue to keep the same background that you had previously. So let me just show you what this looks like. So here when I paste it, you'll notice that the background is the same colors as the others. If I were to select the first option, what that's going to do is it's going to take over the objects that I have, but it's going to leave me with a blank background. And let me show you what that looks like. So here you can see that we have a white background. Now, in order to delete a slide, all you have to do is click on it and press the delete key, or you can just go ahead and right click and cut. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this slide and I'm going to create multiple versions of it. And again, it's up to you how many different slides you would like to have. Now, on slide 3, because this is going to be a new slide, what I'm going to do is I want to get rid of the animations that I have here because I want this to be a fresh palette. We already have this sequence on slide 2, and I want to create a new sequence for slide 3. So all I have to do is click on the first animation in the animation pane, and by holding down the Shift key and clicking on the last animation, what it's going to do is it's going to highlight all. And all I have to do at this point is either press the delete key on my keyboard, or I can right click and select remove. And so now I have these mice with no animations. I can move them around, have new starting points, change the angles if I want this to now come from top down. It really is a blank canvas to create a whole new set of animations. The other great thing about having multiple slides is the fact that they can be reused. And so instead of creating all of these original slides, what I can do is maybe create a set of 8 or 10 or 12 slides that have unique animations. And then once that's done, I can go ahead and copy, and I can paste them in a random order. So I can take the animations that we had on slide 2, I can move it here onto slide 7, and once I set the animations for, let's say, slide 3, 4, or 5, I can copy those, I can copy that, and I can paste it. And really all it takes is changing up the order. And so by doing this, it avoids me needing to create all of these independent slides, because really the pattern that we had on slide 2, if we use it again on slide 8 or slide 12, it really is hard to remember that we've had it there before. Now, the last thing that I would like to point out, and this is important to creating your actual game, is how to save it as a video. And so to do that, once we have all of our slides set up, all we'll have to do is click on File, just like you're saving a PowerPoint, Save As. And here under where it says PowerPoint presentation, we're going to change that, and we'll change that to an MPEG-4 video. So at this point, all I have to do is click the save button, and now the presentation or the game that I put together will be saved as a video. And this is kind of a long process. It does take a little bit of time, but again, once it's done, you will have yourself a video of the game that you created. With that said, I'll go ahead and get started on the next part, which is adding a few more animation sequences and a little more advanced animations. And while I do that, you can go ahead and get started on your animations. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again soon.